In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, welcome to another session of Finding God. We are on chapter 54, 54, which is Surah Al Hijr. It means the stone land. I just want to check 54 is correct, Al Hijr. Before that was Surah Yusuf, if you recall the story of Joseph. And the next one is Surah Al An'am, which is a very large one. So that would require, I think, a couple of months, a month or two to finish off. Um, but yes, so this is only 99 verses, not the longest. And I'll take two visits to finish it. So today's part one, and then part two will be next week. Um, we're getting to the end of Prophet Muhammad's time in Mecca. That time is coming where he has been preaching for a while. The resistance has been there for all this time. Um, and obviously, anybody in his position would lose hope. And they'd wonder if I'm doing the right thing, if I'm not. So God repeatedly and periodically assures the prophet that you're on the right path. That's been commonplace. So this is one of those examples, and just strengthening his resolve, so to speak, in this chapter. Um, so I shall read this with you all, and then expand it further. There's this lovely back and forth going back to the first days of creation between Satan and God, and the back and forth, and I really enjoyed that. And there's a very useful footnote here. Let me fix my camera. There's a very useful footnote here that I tend to really like, and I'll discuss that a bit today as well. It kind of talks about what good deeds remain after you're dead, after you're gone. What remains, and I wouldn't say struggle, but I contest with this idea a lot about what am I leaving behind. Hopefully, God gives me 50, 60 more years, but what am I leaving behind? What is my legacy? So that's one of the reasons why I was attracted to architecture, because you leave buildings behind, and the other was politics, because you can dramatically change the course of history, and then also writing. Everything I've done is about what positive mark can you leave on this planet, on the human civilization. What is the verse that you contribute, as they say in Dead Poet Society? So it says something here which really strengthens my resolve to write more and more. But we'll get to that. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. They also use the term the rocky tract. Some translations use the word the stone land. So that's the one I used. Alif Lam Ra. These are letters of which are one of the miracles of the Quran, and only God knows what they mean. These are verses of the book and a plain Quran. How much would those who disbelieve wish that they had been Muslims, those who had submitted to God's will? This will be on the day of resurrection, when they will see the disbelievers going to hell and Muslims going to paradise. So this is a footnote that will be expanded in more detail when I read chapter 3. Chapter 3 is a large chapter. So it's saying the disbelievers on the day of judgment will be looking at Muslims and say, I wish I were a Muslim. I wish I had been a Muslim, and I would be going into heaven, but I'm not. So it's interesting how it starts that way. I wonder why God starts it that way. I think, well, I understand. Let's put ourselves in Muhammad, peace be upon him's shoes. So he's in Mecca. It's around 1400 years ago. He's in Mecca. He's trying to convince people towards the right path. Even today, if you try to convince people to the right path, tried and tested methods, people resist. They try to get somebody to go to the gym. There's no morality or religion tied to the gym. It's pure science-based health, right? People would still resist you and call you names and try to cancel you online and so forth. Where it's on your side. You could try to help people, but people didn't want to be helped, can't be helped. So I think Muhammad is tired and he's exhausted at that time. So God's first, after praising the book and the Quran, says these disbelievers will envy the Muslims. They would wish they were Muslims. So from the get-go, he is supporting the Prophet. He's giving him his his base, his foundation to rest upon. Like, you're on the right path. Those guys are going to regret it on the day of judgment. That's the start. It's a very loving start, because God. You see, one of the greatest things that this book, this series, this podcast that I do of understanding the Quran, is that it's revealing to me how relatable, personable, and caring God really is. Look at the things he's saying. That's why I'm trying to expand them here. You start the chapter and it's like, look, you're right. Those guys are going to regret it. He doesn't need to say that. He just says, I am God. Do what I say, or I'll kill you, or whatever, or I'll ruin your generations to come. You could do whatever. But he starts the chapter with supporting the Prophet. It's so incredible how divine he is, but how human he can be. Or maybe human is not the right term, because I'm not elevating one over the other. What I'm saying is it is perceived and related to through the human experience, this care that God gives us. Or maybe it's a projection of divinity in the first place. Leave them to eat and enjoy, and let them be preoccupied with false hope. They will come to know. I love it. That's how a parent says it to their children. Or you say to your friend, like, don't bother with them. They'll realize their mistake later. Just keep doing what you're doing. It's so lovely. It's so caring. It baffles me. And never did we destroy a township, but there was a known decree for it. No nation can advance its term nor delay it. And they say, O you, Muhammad, to whom the dhikr, the Quran, has been sent down, verily you are a madman. Yes. Imagine being called insane for years and years and years, and still continuing, and still being gentle and nice and kind and giving, and knowing, because God has given the decree, God has given the permission, that if Muhammad said to Gabriel, oh, destroy these people, Gabriel would pick up a mountain and throw it on them. But no, that's why he is the prophet, and I am not, or we are not, because he has this incredibly gigantic heart. It's incredible how big his heart was. I would have crumbled under the pressure of my own anger and pride and ego long ago. I would have said, oh, you threw a stone at me? Oh, I'll throw a brick at you. An eye for an eye. So it's incredible. Why do you not bring angels to us if you are of the truthful? Very similar to, oh, you believe in God? Where is he? It's the same argument. We send not the angels down except with the truth, i.e. for torment. And in that case, they, the disbelievers, would have no respite. Yes, that's true. Well, that's God's reason for doing it. See, just because you demand something doesn't mean you're going to get it. So if you say, well, if there's a God, prove it. Or if there are angels, why don't you manifest them? But I do understand that the rationalist would say, look, I need evidence. So for me, atheism wouldn't make sense. Agnosticism, I can still respect. That you're saying whether there is or there isn't, we still don't know. I respect that. But to clearly declare that there isn't a God or there isn't divinity is falsehood, because it's fallacy, actually. It doesn't make sense. But this is the same example, right? Why do you not bring angels to us if you are of the truthful? Well, why should I? Why do I need to convince you? I am merely a warner. I think that's what Prophet Muhammad should have said, but he is so kind-hearted and he's so sweet and so generous and kind and caring. Were it I in his place, I would have said the second day, look, hey, don't come at me. I'm a warner. God told me this. I'm telling you now, F off, or something like that. But that's why I'm not a prophet. He require incredible patience. Verily, it is we who have sent down the Quran, and surely we will guard it from corruption. Now, this leads me to the first footnote that says, this verse is a challenge to mankind, and everyone is obliged to believe in the miracles of this Quran. It is clear. It is a clear fact that more than 1400 years have elapsed, and not a single word of this Quran has been changed, although the disbelievers tried their utmost to change it in every way, but they failed miserably in their efforts. As Muslims, we do believe that. Now, I can't confirm nor deny it, but as a Muslim, I believe it. You can certainly start digging, and I'm sure Muslims have, or critics of Islam have, and surely they have found that, the word is still correct, because we have verses as old as, Lord knows, 8th century, 12th century. So we have verses, pages upon pages, which confirm that the word is the same. As it is mentioned in this holy verse, we will guard it. By God, he has guarded it. On the contrary, all the other holy books, the Torah, the Gospel, have been corrupted in the form of additions or subtractions or alterations in the original text. Now, I don't know about the Old Testament. I don't know about the Torah. I don't know. I'm not saying it's incorrect. I just don't know. But for the Gospel, for the Bible, for the New Testament, that's certainly the case. We have confirmation that when Constantine was emperor, changes had been made and things were redirected, rearranged. So we do know of that. Nothing like that about the Quran. And I wonder about the Bhagavad Gita and the Tipitaka and about other religious texts. I wonder whether it happened there too. But in our religion, we believe this is the only preserved word of God. Indeed, we send messengers before you, O Muhammad, amongst the sects, communities of old, and never came a messenger to them, but they did mock at him. Yes. I wonder if Solomon, maybe Adam, I wonder if Solomon is an example of a messenger, a prophet, who was celebrated from the get-go because he had all these powers. He could speak to the metaphysical beings, and he could speak to animals, and he could transport his platform from one end to the other very quickly. And I wonder, and he had those minds. King Solomon is so celebrated, right? I wonder if he had been loved from the beginning. I don't know. But on the whole, when the prophet comes and says, look, this is the truth. I want to share the truth with you. And I want you to come with me. He's always mocked. He's never greeted with, wow, thank you so much for bringing me the truth. Of course, I'll follow you. He's mocked on a whole. Very few people end up believing him. Thus do we let it, polytheism and disbelief, enter the hearts of the Mujrimun because of the mocking at the messengers. Interesting. So God allows evil or sinful or problematic ideas to enter the minds of people who are mocking the messenger. Well, it's possibly deeper than that for sure, because God doesn't play a tit for tat. It's more complicated than that. Certainly, it's multi-layered. But I understand the logic, because somebody who would mock somebody else who has a new idea is exhibiting certain qualities. They're not showing kindness. They're not showing compassion. They're not showing understanding. They're not showing tolerance. They're not showing a zone where you can disagree with someone but still hear them out with respect. They're not showing respect or courtesy. So I understand if you exhibited these qualities, maybe you're showing a side of you which doesn't need to be preserved. I understand that. They would not believe in it, the Quran, and already the examples of God's punishments of the ancients who disbelieved has gone forth. And even if we open to them a gate from the heaven and they were to keep on ascending there too all the day long, they would surely say in the evening, our eyes have been as if dazzled. We have not seen any angel or heaven. Nay, we are people bewitched. That's true. When you don't want to believe something, you do not believe it. You simply cannot. That's confirmation bias is so powerful, so incredibly powerful. If Clark Kent was standing next to you, you wouldn't know that he's Superman. Even though he looks like him, You'd be like, okay, a man, a somewhat handsome-looking man, great, with glasses. You would never think, oh, Superman in a disguise, because the mind functions on a confirmation bias. It doesn't just jump to the next one. And indeed, we have put the big stars in the heaven, and we beautified it for the beholders. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. Thank you. The heavens certainly are beautiful. And we have guarded it near heaven from every outcast, Satan, except him, the devil, who steals the hearing that then he is pursued by a clear flaming fire. I wonder what this is about. There is an idea of shooting stars are thrown at the devil by angels when the devil tries to listen to what conversations are going on the seventh sky, where God sits above the seven skies. But I haven't clearly elaborated that, and I haven't unpacked that. Maybe this is referring to that, but I don't know. A clear flaming fire, but that's what they say that a shooting star is. That you hit the devil, and the devil's like, oh no, and flies away. And the earth we have spread out and have placed therein firm mountains and caused to grow therein all kinds of things in due proportion. Where was I reading this? That mountains are like anchors. I think it was one of the chapters in the Quran. That mountains are, was it mountains that are anchors? Yes, it was. Otherwise, the earth would go up and just float, and the mountains anchor it to its core. It's very interesting. And we have provided therein means of living for you and for those whom you provide not, moving living creatures, cattle, beasts, and other animals. That's true. That's true. And there is not a thing but with us and are the stores thereof, and we send it not down except in a known measure. Yep. The world and the universe is held in a delicate balance, and God governs that dynamic. God is the master of that balance. It's so delicate, and you can Google this because there's an example in China. I think in the 60s or in the 80s, they started shooting a certain type of bird. I forget the name of the bird. They started shooting a certain type of bird because that bird was damaging the crops or so forth in a small capacity, and they started saying, we're going to kill this bird. And then within a year or so, the amount of locusts and the amount of insects increased so much that the whole fields were destroyed and the trees were destroyed. And then people realized, oh, those birds were keeping these insects in check. So, bounded rationality, we don't really understand completely everything that's going on, even though the information is there. But God does, because God made everything. So, everything is brought down in known measure. We may think it is abundant or scarce, but God knows it is exactly how much it needs to be. And we send the winds fertilizing to fill heavily the clouds with water, then cause the water rain to descend from the sky, and we give it to you to drink. And it is not you who are the owners of its stores, to give water to whom you like or to withhold it from whom you like. Very true. Water needs to be shared, especially if you've grown up in a hot country. You realize how important that is. And certainly we it is who give life and cause death, and we are the inheritors. And here, there's another footnote. It says, narrated by Abu Hurairah, God's messenger said, when a person is dead, his deeds are stopped, except 3. Deeds of continuous sadaqah. Sadaqah means an act of charity. For example, an orphanage, or a well for giving water to drink, or a mosque, or a school, or a university, something in your name. Written knowledge with which mankind gets benefit. This is what I find so interesting. And the third one, a righteous, pious son or daughter who begs God to forgive his or her parents. So we call this sadaqah jariyah, or you raise your children well, so when you're gone, they pray for you. They pray, oh Lord, please protect my father, protect my mother. They pray for you, and they continue even after you're gone. So your sins are not adding up, but your good deeds are adding up. This is from Sahih Muslim, the book of Wasiyah, Wills and Testaments. The second part of that footnote is so interesting to me. Written text. It says here as well, something in the form of written text, written knowledge with which mankind gets benefit. I love that because I write. I try to write more and more, and I love that this is the case. Um, I guess I'm going to start writing more now and publicly. Um, and indeed, we know the first generations of you who had passed, and indeed we know the present generations of you, and all also those who will come after. Yes, because you made all of them, and really your Lord will gather them together. Truly, He is all wise, all knowing. And indeed, we created man from dried, sounding clay of altered mud. Yes, this is something I was just discussing with someone a couple of days ago. Man is made of clay, jinn is made of fire, angels are made of light. That is our belief. And the jinn we created aforetime from the smokeless flame of fire. Smokeless flame of fire. So that's a special type of fire. I'm curious about what that looks like. We're made of altered mud, dried sounding clay. And 1400 years ago, we didn't really have the knowledge about carbon. We didn't know that we come from the soil, that we decompose. Maybe we had the knowledge, but I haven't heard of it in those times. That we decompose into the soil, and from those soil come our nutrients, and those nutrients become our sustenance, and that sustenance goes into the sperm and the egg, and that's what creates everything. So my interpretation of this is, you could think of, there's a divine clay somewhere. There is a divine clay somewhere, and God used it to fashion man and woman. Or you could also think, well, 1400 years ago, science wasn't what it is today. It was a different type of science. Maybe it was mysticism. So to explain to them, well, you're all made of carbon, and carbon is this, wouldn't make sense. But to say that you're made of altered clay of altered mud, we can see the connection today. That's the soil connection I'm making. I would make the same argument about the jinn who are made of smokeless fire, but I don't know any jinn personally, unless you unless you consider my younger brother. That's a joke. But I don't know any jinn personally, so I can't say whether the fire is smokeless or not, or whether it's fire or not, and what that would mean today. Could it mean electricity or something else? I don't know. We can't prove or disprove that. But for the clay thing, I think it's a soil carbon argument. And remember when your Lord said to the angels, I'm going to create a man, Adam, from dried sand and clay of altered mud. So when I have fashioned him completely and breathed into him the soul which I created for him, then fall down, prostrating yourselves unto him. I love this scene. I love imagining this scene. God to all the angels, I have made a man, and you're all going to bow before him, and I'm going to breathe life into him. And that's what happened. So the angels prostrated themselves, all of them together, except Iblis. Good old Iblis, Satan. He refused to be among the prostrators. God said, Oh, Iblis, what is your reason for not being among the prostrators? Iblis said, I'm not the one to prostrate myself to a human being whom you created from dried sand and clay of altered mud. God said, then get out from here, for verily you are Rajim, an outcast or a cursed one. Now, this is the first time I've seen that word, I think, Rajim. You are an outcast. It's an ego thing, isn't it, Satan? I'm addressing Satan directly, but I don't know Satan personally. But it is an ego thing, isn't it? I'm made of fire. Look at me. I'm the greatest jinn to ever exist. I'm this, I'm that. I'm not going to bow before somebody made of clay. I have you know, as a fire sign, I take great offense to that. But a fact is a fact. Small amount of mud can put out fire. Just like that. Because it reduces the amount of oxygen going into the flame. So to consider clay below fire is to consider substance, longevity, stability below dash and dazzle. So you made a huge ego error. And I think God knew. I know God knew that this was going to play out. This is going to be the play that exists onto the world. I think that was evidently clear. And I think he orchestrated it as such. And verily the curse shall be upon you till the day of recompense. Iblis said, Oh my Lord, give me then respite till the day they will be resurrected. The dead will be resurrected. God said, then verily you are of those reprieved till the day of the time appointed. It's so interesting because Satan knows that when God says something, that's it. God doesn't say, should I banish Satan? What do you think, Gabriel? God, that's not God. God is clear. God's decisive. God is evidently all-knowing. God is without doubt. God simply is. So when God says, get out, there's no doubt there. There isn't like, oh, maybe I'll beg him for forgiveness and God will be like, all right, maybe you can stay. No, that's us. We have those blurred lines. God is clear. So when God has said, get out, so Satan's like, okay, I'm leaving, but please give me respite till the last day because I will show you what I can do. And God says, okay, you are free till the final day. And Satan says, oh my Lord, because you misled me, I shall indeed adorn the path of error for them on the earth, and I shall mislead them all. Because you misled me. How dare you, piece of whatever. I'm curious why I said that. That's interesting. An idiot can say to an intelligent person, you're fooling me, you're guiding me wrong. Fair? If you try to tell an idiot something, they'll say, I ain't listen to you. You're lying to me or you're guiding me wrong. You're misleading me. So for Satan to say that God has misled him is again Satan being at fault. Satan's vision is incorrect. He's not describing a current state of affairs. Satan is pure ego and nothing more. He's lost. He's a poor soul. And we don't need to take pity on him because God will handle his affairs. But Satan is a poor, ego-filled soul, and we must work hard not to let him into our hearts, which is very hard. I shall indeed adorn the path of error for them on the earth, and I shall mislead them all, except your chosen slaves among them. And God said, this is the way which will lead straight to me. Certainly, you shall have no authority over my slaves, except those who follow you of the Ghawun, Mushrikun, and those who go astray, criminals, polytheists, and evildoers. I see good new words coming in. And surely, hell is the promised place for them all. And I'm going to stop here. I'm not going to talk about the 7 gates of hell. I'll stop here because then I'm going to cover the rest next week. But see, it's a very simple sort of a chapter. It's not heavy like Joseph. It's not like stories of Moses and Noah or other stories that God is describing to Muhammad. It's a simpler chapter because you're getting to that point of time that his days in Mecca are slowly coming to an end. And he's about to move to Medina. I think, actually, it should be around chapter 86 when it changes. Because then he goes to Mecca and the remaining chapters are there. But today it's only 54, so we should have 30 chapters left. But you're coming to that point of time. And I suppose wars were also happening and guidance was being provided to them. So that was all taking place right now. But I'm going to stop right here and I'll pick this up again next week. We'll finish this chapter and then we'll take on the task of the gigantic Surah Al-An'am, which I'm just trying to remember, has 165 verses. So, until next week, have a wonderful Friday, have a wonderful weekend,